This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter, the Perimeter Broadcast. What you are hearing is an original scripted audio drama. It is not a real emergency alert. If you are hearing this transmission, emergency conditions are ongoing. A deep space probe launched nearly 50 years ago has transmitted a structured linguistic reply to a question no facility on Earth can account for sending. The National Signals Coordination Office has confirmed the transmission is not a reflection, not a buffer echo, and not a known test pattern. By the end of this broadcast, the content of that reply will have changed in a way that narrows its possible audience considerably. In Manzanita this morning, a gold anodized disc sleeve, a decorative replica of the record carried aboard the probe, is still hanging by a thumbtack in a child's bedroom, catching the first light through east-facing blinds. The monitoring authority's current classification for this event is anomalous but non-threatening. That phrase has not been updated since Tuesday. It is now early Friday. This is KQWL 1620 AM. The initial detection was Monday evening Pacific time. It is now early Friday morning, 6:15, and I am working from a compiled record, verified where I can. I will take it from the beginning. The compiled record begins with a routine status check at the Deep Space Communications Facility. I am not naming it, and I will not name it, because the facility itself has requested that press inquiries route through the National Monitoring Tier, a routine status check that returned an unexpected data packet. The packet was initially flagged as a buffer anomaly. The engineer on shift noted it, logged it, and did not escalate it for 11 hours. I want to be careful with that detail because it matters. For 11 hours, the only record of this event was a single line in a maintenance log, category unresolved but non-critical. The packet was 412 bytes. The probe's nominal telemetry packets are between 200 and 300 bytes. The extra content was, at that point, not decoded. The fidelity of the signal, and I am using that word the way the monitoring office uses it, meaning the degree to which the content resolves into interpretable structure, was assessed at 0.03 on a scale where 1 represents fully coherent language, noise essentially. That was Monday. By midday Tuesday, a secondary review team had isolated the packet and determined that its encoding format did not match any transmission protocol the probe was designed to use. I will say that again because it is the detail that moved this from a maintenance flag to an institutional concern. The format is not one the probe's hardware can generate. The onboard transmitter has a fixed set of encoding capabilities, documented exhaustively in the engineering archives, and the format of this packet is not among them. The review team's preliminary note, which I have seen summarized in a coordination memo but not in full, uses the phrase protocol mismatch unresolved. The fidelity assessment was revised upward to 0.08 by Tuesday afternoon, after a spectral analysis suggested the presence of repeating substructures within the extra bytes. Not language. Not yet. But not random either. By late Tuesday, the National Monitoring Tier had been notified. I can confirm that notification occurred because the monitoring tier's public-facing status page was updated at 1947 UTC Tuesday with a single line, anomalous telemetry under review, no operational impact. That line is still there as of this morning. It has not been amended. The operational impact language is, as far as I can tell, technically accurate in the narrow sense that the probe's other instruments continue to function and that no commands have been disrupted. But I will note that the phrase no operational impact has a specific bureaucratic meaning, and it does not mean no concern. It means the spacecraft is still responding to instructions. Whether the spacecraft is also doing something else is a different question, and the status page does not address it. Wednesday morning, this is when our desk picked up the compiled record. A university linguistics department in the Pacific Northwest issued a brief internal memo, not intended for public release, describing the repeating substructures as consistent with a generative grammar at an early stage of resolution. That memo was leaked within hours. I have not seen the full document. What I have seen is a 3-paragraph summary circulated by a signals intelligence cooperative that monitors deep space communication bands as a public interest project. Their summary states that the substructures exhibit recursive properties, patterns that nest inside themselves in ways that random noise does not. The cooperative assessed the fidelity at 0.14 as of Wednesday noon. I am going to hold that number for you. 0.14. That is where we were 48 hours ago. I will tell you where it is now in a moment. A woman in Manzanita, she runs a daycare out of her home on Lanita Avenue, called Thursday just after sunrise to ask if the sound her dishwasher makes at the end of its cycle had changed, or if she was imagining it. She said it used to chime 3 notes. Now it chimes 4. She said the 4th note is lower than the others and holds longer. She asked if we had received other calls about appliances. We had not, at that point. I told her it was probably a software update pushed by the manufacturer. She said the dishwasher is not connected to the internet. It is a 1997 model. She bought it used. I logged the call. I did not know what to do with it. Then I am less sure what to do with it now. The coordination office has confirmed that no uplink command was sent to the probe in the 19 days preceding the anomalous return. Whatever this is replying to, it is not replying to us. That is the official position. Now, Friday morning, 6:20 a.m. Pacific. The fidelity figure I mentioned, the measure of how much interpretable structure exists in the anomalous content, has been revised 4 times since Wednesday. The current assessment provided to the coordination office at approximately 0300 this morning and relayed to editorial desks including this one at 0445 places the fidelity at 0.31. That is a tenfold increase from the initial reading on Monday. I am not characterizing that number, I am reporting it. The content of the transmission, at this fidelity level, is described in the coordination memo as partially segmentable into discrete units with consistent internal boundaries. The memo does not use the word words. It uses the phrase discrete units. A caller from Wheeler, and I should say that we have received a number of calls since Wednesday from residents who are, reasonably, alarmed by what they are reading online. A caller from Wheeler, who identifies as a retired communications technician, contacted this desk early Thursday evening to ask whether the probe signal could be received on civilian equipment. The answer, as best I can determine, is no. The probe transmits at approximately 23 watts on S-band and X-band frequencies that require a dish antenna of at least 34 meters to resolve at this distance. No civilian installation on the Oregon coast has that capability. I am mentioning this because the caller's concern was specific. He had heard a claim, circulating on shortwave forums, that amateur operators in the southern hemisphere had independently detected the anomalous signal. I cannot verify that claim. The Signals Intelligence Cooperative I mentioned earlier has stated that they are aware of the reports and are attempting to confirm them through their own network of volunteer dish operators. As of this morning, they described the amateur detection claims as unconfirmed but technically plausible given the spectral characteristics. That is not a confirmation. I want to be clear about that. Now I mentioned that the fidelity figure has moved. I want to return to the timeline. Thursday morning, yesterday, the university linguistics team issued a second memo, this one through official channels. It is a 2-page preliminary assessment and the coordination office has authorized its broad characterization, though not its reproduction. The assessment identifies what it calls positional regularities consistent with subject-verb-object syntax. Their statistical confidence on that finding is above 90%. I need to be precise with that. The assessment is not claiming the content is language. It is claiming that the content exhibits structural properties that, in every known case, are only produced by language. The distinction matters, apparently, to the people writing the memos. It matters less, I suspect, to you. The memo further notes that the grammatical structure does not correspond to any language in the university's reference corpus, a corpus that includes over 7,000 natural languages and an additional 1,200 constructed and historical languages. Whatever structure this is, it is not one we have on file. A second caller, this one from Bay City, reached the desk Thursday afternoon. This person, a night shift worker at a dairy processing facility who listens to our broadcast during the early morning hours, asked whether the content of the transmission had been translated. The answer, as of this morning, is no, but I should qualify that. The coordination memo distinguishes between translation, which requires a known source language, and semantic extraction, which attempts to derive meaning from structure alone. The memo indicates that semantic extraction efforts are underway at 2 separate institutions, one domestic and one operating under a signals intelligence framework that I am not permitted to identify further. No results from either effort have been shared with editorial desks. What I can tell you is that the fidelity figure's movement from 0.14 on Wednesday to 0.31 this morning suggests that the extraction task is becoming easier, not harder. The content is resolving. Whether that means it is becoming more structured or whether our tools are simply finding more of the structure that was always there, is a question I have asked the coordination office directly and have not yet received an answer to. It is now 6:35 a.m. Pacific Time, Friday. The coordination office is expected to issue its next status update within the hour. When that arrives, I will relay it. In the meantime, residents within the Tillamook County perimeter should be aware that no advisory has been issued regarding this event. There is no action required. The monitoring tiers classification remains anomalous but non-threatening, and no changes to daily routine have been recommended by any civil authority. I will continue to compile as reports come in. Later Friday morning, approximately 9:50 a.m. Pacific, the coordination office issued its expected status update. I have the summary in front of me. The update is 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph reiterates the operational status of the probe. All primary instruments functioning, all command uplinks responsive, no degradation in telemetry outside the anomalous packet. The second paragraph revises the fidelity assessment. The figure is now 0.39. That is the 5th upward revision since Monday. The third paragraph introduces new language that was not present in any previous communication from the monitoring tier. The phrase is structured content with recipient-oriented characteristics. I asked for clarification on that phrase through the editorial liaison channel. The response I received approximately 40 minutes later was that the phrase refers to features within the content that appear to presuppose a specific audience, features that would only be meaningful to an entity already in possession of certain contextual information. The liaison did not specify what contextual information. When I pressed, the response was that the coordination office would address this in its next scheduled update, expected Saturday morning. That is more than 20 hours from now. I am not satisfied with that timeline, and I have said so in writing. One more thing to clear from the board. You may have seen the claim that the probe's golden record was played back, accessed physically by something near the spacecraft. The university calls that a misreading of frequency overlap data. Their position is that no evidence supports mechanical engagement with the onboard record. I have nothing that contradicts them. Moving on. Friday afternoon, roughly 2:15 p.m., a caller from NetArts, a woman who works in the administrative office of a regional medical clinic, contacted this desk to report something she described as probably unrelated but strange enough to mention. Her facility's patient record system had flagged an anomaly during a routine overnight backup. The backup log showed a file size discrepancy. The archive database was approximately 400 kilobytes larger after backup than before. The clinic's IT contractor examined the discrepancy Thursday evening and determined that the additional data consisted of what the contractor described as non-patient content embedded in a deprecated field. The contractor reportedly extracted the content and found it to be a string of characters that did not correspond to any encoding format used by the record system. The caller was clear that she did not believe this was connected to the deep space event. She mentioned it because the contractor had, apparently, made that connection himself and had become agitated about it. I am including this because the desk received 3 similar calls Thursday evening and Friday morning, 2 from the Tillamook area and 1 routed through our relay from a station further south, each describing small data volume discrepancies in unrelated institutional systems. I have no means of verifying a connection. The coordination office, when I forwarded a summary of these calls, responded that they were aware of similar reports nationally and were not currently treating them as related to the primary anomaly. Now I need to report something that arrived at the desk within the last 90 minutes. So, roughly 8:45 a.m. Friday, though I am describing it to you now mid-afternoon, because verification took time. The Signals Intelligence Cooperative I mentioned earlier, the public interest group that monitors deep space bands, issued a bulletin to its membership at 08:30 Friday, stating that the anomalous transmission's content had undergone what they called a domain shift. Their bulletin, which I have seen in full, states that prior to approximately 0600 Friday, the structured content exhibited properties consistent with an abstract formal grammar, recursive, rule-governed, but without identifiable semantic content. After 0600, the content began exhibiting what the cooperative describes as indexical features. I had to look that term up. In linguistics, an indexical feature is a component of language that points to something outside itself. A pronoun, a demonstrative, a reference to a specific time or place. The cooperative's assessment is that the anomalous content has transitioned from exhibiting the structure of language to exhibiting the function of language. They place the fidelity at 0.44 based on their own analysis, which is slightly ahead of the Coordination Office's figure. The cooperative notes that this transition occurred over a period of less than 6 hours. There is a detail in the cooperative's bulletin that I want to relay carefully. Among the indexical features they identified is a set of what they describe as positional markers consistent with second-person address. In plain language, the content appears to be structured as though it is speaking to someone, not broadcasting, not reporting, addressing. The cooperative is careful to note that this assessment is probabilistic, not definitive, and that the sample size is small, but their confidence level, as stated in the bulletin, is above 80%. The fidelity figure, which was 0.03 on Monday evening, is now, as of the cooperative's Friday morning assessment, 0.44. I will hold that number. I should note that we received, late Thursday, a coordination memo updating the public guidance status for this event. The memo states that while no emergency advisory is warranted, the monitoring tier recommends that facilities operating automated data archival systems conduct a manual review of backup integrity during the current monitoring period. This is described as a precautionary measure. Facilities with automated backup systems should conduct a manual review. That is the current guidance. Friday evening, perhaps 7:40 p.m. The desk has been compiling throughout the day, and I want to catch you up on several developments that arrived between mid-afternoon and early evening. First, the university linguistics team has requested, through the coordination office, access to the raw signal data rather than the process summaries they have been working from. This request was, as of 5 p.m. Friday, still pending approval from the facility that operates the receiving antenna. The request is notable because it suggests the linguistics team believes the process summaries may be losing information, that there is structure in the raw signal that the standard processing pipeline is not preserving. I do not know whether this request has been granted. I will report when I do. Second, a third caller, from Pacific City, reached the desk Friday afternoon. This person operates a small charter fishing service out of the harbor there and monitors marine band radio as a matter of routine. He reported that at approximately 11:15 a.m. Friday, his marine band receiver picked up a brief burst of what he described as data noise on a frequency not typically used for maritime traffic. The burst lasted between 2 and 4 seconds. He recorded it on a handheld device and offered to send us the file. We have received the file. I have listened to it. It sounds, to my untrained ear, like a modem handshake, a rapid series of tones. I have forwarded it to the Signals Cooperative for analysis. They have acknowledged receipt but have not yet commented. The timing is what it is. Third, the Coordination Office issued a brief supplemental memo at 6:15 p.m. Friday. The memo is one paragraph. It states that the fidelity assessment has been revised to 0.47, and that the content now exhibits what the memo calls referential specificity, content elements that correspond to verifiable external facts, not abstract patterns, specific, checkable things. The memo does not say which external facts, it does not give examples, it states that a detailed briefing will be provided to authorized editorial desks within 24 hours, and that, pending that briefing, the monitoring tier's classification remains unchanged, anomalous but non-threatening. I will say plainly that I find the gap between referential specificity and non-threatening difficult to reconcile, but I am not in a position to challenge the classification. The Friday afternoon maintenance check for KQ Cobiel's primary transmitter tower returned a power output reading of 4.7 kilowatts. The Thursday reading for comparison was 4.8. Both figures are within acceptable tolerance. The licensed range is 4.5 to 5.0, but I would not normally mention the difference. The duty engineer noted no other irregularities. Backup systems nominal. It is now approximately 8 p.m. Friday evening Pacific time. I have been at this desk since before dawn and the overnight relief is expected within the hour. Before I hand over the compiled record, I want to state clearly what is confirmed and what is not. Confirmed, the probe transmitted a data packet in a format its hardware cannot produce. Confirmed, the content of that packet exhibits linguistic structure that does not match any known language. Confirmed, the fidelity of that structure is increasing over time and is now assessed at 0.47. Confirmed, the content has transitioned from abstract grammar to referential addressed communication. not confirmed, any connection between this event and the data discrepancies reported in civilian systems. Not confirmed, any mechanism by which the probe could generate this content. Not confirmed, the identity of the intended recipient. The Coordination Office's next scheduled update is tomorrow morning. The desk will resume at that time. Saturday morning, early, roughly 6 a.m. The overnight desk left a handover note. I will summarize what it contains. At approximately 0200 Saturday, the Signals Intelligence Cooperative issued an unscheduled bulletin to its membership. The bulletin states that the anomalous content, as of 0130, has begun producing what the cooperative terms proper noun equivalent structures. These are content elements that behave syntactically the way names behave in known languages. They occupy subject and object positions, they resist modification, and they recur in fixed form. The cooperative identifies at least 3 distinct proper noun equivalent structures in the current content stream. They have not attempted to assign meanings to these structures. Their assessment of fidelity, 0.52, that number was 0.478 hours ago. The overnight desk also noted that 2 additional calls came in from residents, one in Rockaway Beach, one in Garibaldi, each reporting brief data irregularities in personal devices. One described a home weather station displaying a location name that does not correspond to any known municipality. The other described a router log showing outbound traffic to an address that, when queried, returns no identifying information. Both callers were advised that these reports had been forwarded to the Coordination Office. The overnight desk received no response from the Coordination Office between midnight and 6 a.m. Saturday, 8:40 a.m. The Coordination Office's scheduled morning update has arrived. It is longer than previous updates, 5 paragraphs. I will summarize. Paragraph 1 confirms that the probe remains operationally nominal. Paragraph 2 revises the fidelity assessment to 0.55. Paragraph 3 introduces new terminology. The anomalous content is now described as exhibiting recipient-specific indexing, which the memo defines as content elements whose referential value can only be resolved by a particular receiving party. The memo states that this assessment is based on structural analysis, not on any successful decoding of the content. Paragraph 4, and this is new, acknowledges for the first time that parallel data events in civilian and institutional systems are under active review for possible correlation with the primary anomaly. I want to note that language. On Thursday, the Coordination Office said these reports were not currently treated as related. On Saturday morning, they are under active review for possible correlation. That is a different posture. The memo does not explain what changed between Thursday and Saturday. Paragraph 5 states that the monitoring tiers classification has been revised. The new classification is anomalous under expanded review. The phrase non-threatening has been removed. No replacement characterization of threat level is provided. I want to pause on that. Since Monday, the official classification has been anomalous but non-threatening. As of this morning, it is anomalous under expanded review. The desk notes the change and moves on. Saturday, late morning, approximately 11:20. I have received, through the editorial liaison channel, a document I was not expecting. It is a partial transcript of an internal engineering review conducted at the Deep Space Communications Facility on Wednesday, 3 days ago. The transcript is incomplete. Several passages are marked as withheld under operational security protocols, and 2 full pages are missing from the sequence. What remains is a discussion among 4 engineers, identified by role, not by name, regarding the encoding format of the anomalous packet. One engineer states that the format bears structural similarity to a compression protocol that was proposed during the probe's design phase in the mid-1970s, but was ultimately not implemented due to bandwidth constraints. The protocol was documented in an internal technical report, circulated to the design team and archived. It was never loaded onto the spacecraft, it was never transmitted to the spacecraft, it exists only in paper records held at the facility's engineering archive. A second engineer asks whether the archived report could have been digitized and made accessible through any networked system. The first engineer replies that the report was digitized in 2003 as part of a bulk archival project, but that the digitized version was stored on an air-gapped system with no external network interface. The transcript breaks off at this point. The next legible passage, several pages later, contains only the phrase, "No consensus reached on mechanism." I have asked the liaison office whether this document was intended for editorial distribution. I have not yet received an answer to that question. Saturday afternoon, roughly 1:45, two developments. First, the university linguistics team has issued its third memo, this one co-authored with a computational semiotics group from a second institution. The memo is technical, and I am working from a summary provided by the editorial liaison. The key finding is this. The proper noun equivalent structures identified by the signals cooperative correspond, statistically, to indexical patterns that would be generated by a system referencing specific geographic coordinates. The memo does not claim the content contains coordinates. It claims the content structure is consistent with what a system would produce if it were describing locations. The memo identifies the confidence level of this assessment as 74% and notes that the sample remains small. The fidelity figure in this memo is given as 0.58. Second development, the Coordination Office has issued new public guidance, effective immediately. All facilities operating network data archival systems within the National Monitoring Tier's jurisdiction are advised to disable automated synchronization protocols and revert to manual backup procedures until further notice. This includes hospitals, municipal record offices, academic institutions, and utilities. The guidance states that this measure is precautionary and does not indicate a confirmed compromise of any system. If your facility uses automated backup synchronization, disable it and revert to manual procedures. That is the current guidance. A caller from Nehalem reached the desk shortly after noon Saturday. This person works as a custodian at a consolidated school district facility and reported that the school's attendance record system had, during Friday's automated overnight process, generated a report containing student identification numbers that do not correspond to any enrolled student. The caller stated that the district's administrative office was closed for the weekend and that she had been unable to reach the IT coordinator by phone. She described the phantom records as appearing in a format consistent with legitimate entries, properly structured, correctly sequenced, but referencing individuals who do not exist in the district's enrollment database. She counted 14 such entries. I asked whether the entries contained names. She said they contained identification numbers and enrollment dates only, no names. Some of the enrollment dates were in the future. I forwarded this report to the coordination office. They acknowledged receipt within the hour, faster than their usual response time, and asked for the specific format of the phantom entries. I relayed the request to the caller, and am awaiting her response. Saturday late afternoon, 4:10 p.m. The Signals Cooperative has issued another bulletin. This one is marked urgent, the first time they have used that designation in connection with this event. The bulletin states that the anomalous transmissions content underwent a significant structural reorganization between approximately noon and 3 p.m. Saturday. The cooperative describes this as a transition from distributed referential content to consolidated narrative structure. In their assessment, the content is no longer producing isolated linguistic fragments. It is producing connected sequences, sentences, or their equivalent, that relate to one another in ordered progression. The fidelity assessment has been revised to 0.63. The cooperative projects that at this rate, fidelity will reach 0.75 within 36 to 48 hours. They call that threshold functionally decodable. After that point, the content can be read. The cooperative bulletin concludes with a statement I will paraphrase. They are requesting that the coordination office convene an emergency review panel before the content reaches decodable fidelity, because once it does, the question of whether to decode it becomes a policy decision rather than a technical one. The cooperative states that this decision should not be made by individual researchers working in isolation. The Saturday afternoon maintenance check for KQWL's primary tower returned a power output reading of 4.6 kilowatts. That is down from 4.7 on Friday. Still within license tolerance, but the direction is now consistent across 3 consecutive readings. The duty engineer has noted this in the log and has scheduled an off-cycle inspection of the transmission line for Monday morning. It is now approximately 4:30 p.m. Saturday. The coordination office's next update is not expected until tomorrow morning. The fidelity stands at 0.63. The content is producing connected sequences. The cooperative's estimate places decodable threshold at some point between Sunday evening and Monday afternoon. I will be at this desk through the night. When more arrives, I will relay it. Saturday evening, 7:50 p.m. I should correct one earlier assumption. I stated that the coordination office's next update was not expected until Sunday morning. That is no longer accurate. At approximately 6:45 p.m. Saturday, the editorial liaison channel received an unscheduled supplemental memo, the second such unscheduled communication in 48 hours. The memo is brief, 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph states that the Coordination Office has convened what it describes as an accelerated review group to assess the trajectory of the anomalous content. This is not the emergency panel the Signals Cooperative requested. The memo makes that distinction explicitly, but it is, as far as I can determine, the first time the monitoring tier has assembled a dedicated group for this event rather than handling it through routine channels. The second paragraph provides an updated fidelity figure, 0.66. That is up from 0.63 approximately 3 hours ago. The memo notes that the rate of increase has not decelerated and offers no projection for when or whether it might. The memo also contains a single line that I need to relay precisely. It states, content elements identified in the current stream include structures consistent with temporal reference, specifically forward-pointing temporal reference. I asked the liaison office to clarify what forward-pointing temporal reference means in this context. The response, which arrived within 20 minutes, was content that appears to describe events or states that have not yet occurred. That is what I was told. I am reporting it without interpretation. A caller from Cape Mears reached the desk at approximately 7:15 Saturday evening. This person, who described himself as a retired federal employee, though he did not specify which agency, stated that he had been monitoring online discussions among amateur radio operators and wanted to alert us to what he called a consensus forming within that community. He said that at least 4 independent amateur stations, operating dish antennas in the 9 to 12 meter range, smaller than the 34-meter dishes used by the Deep Space Network, but not trivially small, had reported detecting structured content on the probe's downlink frequency over the past 24 hours. He emphasized that these detections were marginal and required significant post-processing to resolve, but that the operators involved were experienced and were coordinating their findings through a private mailing list to which he had access. He said the amateur operator's independent fidelity estimate was consistent with the cooperative's published figure. I asked him whether the amateur stations had attempted any decoding. He said they had not, and that several operators had expressed reservations about doing so without institutional guidance. I thanked him and logged the report. I have no way to verify amateur detections independently, but I note that this is now the second source, after the Signals Cooperative, to suggest that the anomalous signal can be resolved on equipment smaller than the official Deep Space Network's primary antennas. The Coordination Office has not commented on this publicly. I want to address a third claim that has been circulating since Friday evening and that I have now seen repeated in several places with increasing confidence. The claim is that the anomalous content contains, or will contain, personal information about specific living individuals, that it is, in effect, addressing named persons. This claim appears to originate from a misinterpretation of the Coordination Office's phrase, recipient-specific indexing. I have checked with the editorial liaison. The liaison states that recipient-specific indexing refers to structural features of the content that presuppose a particular type of receiver, not a particular person. The analogy offered was that a message written in French presupposes a French-speaking receiver without necessarily addressing any one French speaker by name. The liaison was explicit that no personal names, identification numbers, or biographical details have been identified in the content as of Saturday evening. The content exhibits structure consistent with addressed communication. It does not, as of this hour, address anyone by name. That is what I can confirm. It is now 8:20 p.m. Saturday Pacific Time. To summarize where we are, 72 hours into this desk's coverage and approximately 120 hours since the initial detection, the probe has transmitted content in a format its hardware cannot produce. That content has progressed from undifferentiated noise to structured grammar to referential language to connected narrative with forward-pointing temporal reference. The fidelity stands at 0.66. The cooperative estimates decodable threshold within 30 to 40 hours. The monitoring tier has removed the phrase non-threatening from its classification and convened an accelerated review group. Facilities have been advised to disable automated data synchronization. No emergency advisory has been issued to the general public, and no action is required of residents at this time beyond the guidance already relayed. The desk will continue through the night, more as it arrives, Sunday morning, early, perhaps 5 a.m. I have been at this desk through the night, The coordination office's scheduled morning update arrived at 0400, earlier than expected. The fidelity figure is now 0.71. The memo is 4 paragraphs. The first confirms probe operational status. The second provides the revised fidelity figure and notes that the accelerated review group has met twice since its formation. The third paragraph states that the review group has recommended, and I am paraphrasing closely, that no attempt to decode the anomalous content be made by any party until a full interagency consultation has been completed. The memo describes this as a recommendation, not a directive, and acknowledges that the Coordination Office lacks enforcement authority over academic institutions, private cooperatives, or foreign facilities. The fourth paragraph contains new public guidance. Effective immediately, individuals and organizations in possession of receiving equipment capable of resolving the probe's downlink frequency are advised to suspend monitoring activities and contact the Coordination Office for further instruction. I will read that again. If you operate equipment capable of receiving the probe's signal, you are advised to suspend monitoring and contact the Coordination Office. That is the current guidance. I want to note something about that advisory. The previous guidance, issued Saturday, addressed facilities with network data archival systems. This morning's guidance addresses individuals with receiving equipment. The scope is different. Sunday, approximately 8:15 a.m. The Signals Cooperative has not issued a bulletin since their urgent communication yesterday afternoon. Their public status page, which normally updates every 6 hours, has not updated since 7 p.m. Saturday. I have attempted to reach their editorial contact through the channel we have used previously. No response. I do not know whether this silence is related to the Coordination Office's recommendation to suspend monitoring activities. I do not know whether the cooperative is complying with that recommendation or whether something else accounts for the gap. I am noting the absence and moving to what I do have. A caller from Oceanside reached the desk at approximately 7 a.m. Sunday. This person manages the overnight inventory at a small grocery cooperative and reported that the store's automated ordering system, which generates purchase orders based on sales data and stock levels, produced an overnight order that included items not carried by the store and, in several cases, items that do not appear in the supplier's catalog. The caller described approximately 30 line items that reference product codes with no match in the cooperative's database. She stated that the ordering system has no manual override scheduled and should not be generating orders outside its programmed parameters. She has disconnected the system from the network pending review. I asked whether the unrecognized product codes bore any structural resemblance to one another. She said they were formatted identically to legitimate codes, same length, same check digit structure, but pointed to nothing. I logged the report separately, and I mention this because the timing is close enough to note. The county's Harbor Operations Office in Garibaldi has reported an irregularity in its berth assignment system. The harbor master's automated log, which tracks vessel arrivals, departures, and slip assignments, recorded 4 berth assignments overnight for vessels with registration numbers that do not match any vessel in the state maritime database. The assignments are formatted correctly: berth number, time of arrival, estimated departure, length overall, but correspond to no physical vessel present in the harbor. The harbor master describes these as phantom entries and has filed a report with the county IT office. The berth assignment system is air-gapped from the internet but does connect to the harbor's internal network for the purpose of coordinating with fuel and provisioning services. The harbor master has not been advised to disconnect the system, as Sunday's coordination memo addressed only facilities with external-facing automated synchronization. I am noting this because the system is, by its architecture, not supposed to be reachable by any external data source. I have forwarded this to the Coordination Office. No response as of this hour. Sunday, mid-morning, 10:50 a.m. I have now been at this desk for approximately 28 hours. I want to report something that concerns this station directly. At approximately 9:15 a.m. Sunday, our duty engineer conducted the routine morning inspection of KQWL's primary transmission equipment. The power output reading was 4.5 kilowatts, the bottom edge of license tolerance. That is the 4th consecutive reading showing a decline: 4.8 Thursday, 4.7 Friday, 4.6 Saturday, 4.5 this morning. The engineer has escalated this to our station's technical director and has requested an emergency inspection of the transmission line, moved up from the Monday schedule. In addition, and this is the item I want to be precise about, The engineer's log contains a notation I have not seen before in any previous maintenance report for this station. The notation reads, "Carrier signal spectrogram shows low amplitude substructure not consistent with modulation artifacts. Possible external coupling. Recommend spectrum analysis before next broadcast cycle." I read that to you as it was written. I do not have the technical background to interpret it fully. What I understand it to mean is that our broadcast signal, the signal you are hearing right now, contains something in it that should not be there. The engineer describes it as low amplitude, meaning faint, and as not consistent with normal artifacts of our equipment. I have asked the engineer whether this could be related to the declining power output. His response was that he could not rule it out, but that the two phenomena might also be unrelated. The spectrum analysis he recommended has been scheduled for this afternoon, Sunday early afternoon, 1:20 p.m. The coordination office has issued an unscheduled update, the third in 2 days. Fidelity, 0.74. The memo contains one new development that I need to relay carefully. The accelerated review group has completed what the memo describes as a controlled reception comparison. 2 receiving facilities, one operating a full aperture antenna and one operating a significantly reduced antenna, were asked to independently receive and record the probe's downlink over a 6-hour window Saturday night. The content received by both facilities was then compared. The memo states that the 2 recordings are not identical, not different in noise or signal quality, different in content. The full aperture facility received structured content consistent with the ongoing narrative stream. The reduced aperture facility received structured content that the review group describes as responsive to the receiving facility's operational characteristics. The memo defines this as meaning the content received by the second facility references parameters specific to that facility, its geographic location, its antenna configuration, its operational history. The memo states that this finding is preliminary and is being replicated. But if I understand correctly, and I want to be careful here, the implication is that the content of the transmission changes depending on who is listening to it. That is what the memo appears to describe. I do not know what that means for us. I want to relay the university linguistics team's response to this finding, which arrived through the editorial liaison approximately 40 minutes after the coordination memo. The university's statement is one paragraph. It says, "If the controlled comparison result is replicated, the anomalous content cannot be modeled as a broadcast. A broadcast is identical for all receivers. Content that varies by receiver is not a broadcast. It is correspondence." That is the university's characterization. They do not elaborate. They note that their team is requesting direct access to both recordings for independent analysis. Sunday, approximately 2:45 p.m. Pacific Time. I have 2 items remaining before I pause for the spectrum analysis of our own equipment, which is scheduled for 3 p.m. First, the retired federal employee from Cape Mears called the desk again this morning. He reports that the amateur radio operators he is in contact with have largely complied with the coordination office's recommendation to suspend monitoring. However, he states that at least one operator, location unspecified, continued receiving through Saturday night and reported that the content resolved on his 12-meter dish exhibited what he described as personal characteristics. The caller did not elaborate on what personal characteristics means in this context, and when I pressed, he said the operator had become unwilling to discuss specifics and had since disconnected his equipment. I am logging this without further comment. Second, the county's waste collection routing system, which generates optimized pickup routes based on container fill sensors distributed across the service area, failed to produce a valid route map for Monday's scheduled collection. The operations supervisor reports that the system generated a map referencing 13 collection points that do not exist in the county's infrastructure database. The points are formatted as valid GPS coordinates and fall within the county boundary, but correspond to locations where no collection containers are installed, empty lots, forested parcels, a section of Highway 101 with no structures. The supervisor has reverted to a manually generated route for Monday's service and has filed a maintenance ticket with the system vendor. The vendor's response, according to the supervisor, was that the system should not be capable of generating coordinates not present in its reference table. It is now 3 p.m. Sunday. The spectrum analysis of KQWL's carrier signal is about to begin. The fidelity figure for the anomalous content stands at 0.74. The cooperative's estimate of decodable threshold was 36 to 48 hours as of yesterday afternoon. By that estimate, we are within 24 hours. The Coordination Office's recommendation against decoding remains in effect but is non-binding. The desk will resume when the spectrum analysis is complete. Sunday, 3:40 p.m. The spectrum analysis is complete. I have the engineer's preliminary report in front of me. I am going to read the relevant findings as closely as I can without misrepresenting the technical language. The analysis confirms the presence of low-amplitude substructure in KQWL's carrier signal. The substructure occupies a narrow band approximately 2 kHz above our primary modulation frequency. Its power level is roughly 40 decibels below our carrier, faint enough that no listener would perceive it as audio interference, but clearly present on the spectrogram. The engineer describes the substructure as non-random, exhibiting periodic features consistent with structured data encoding. He further notes that the substructure was not present in the most recent full spectrum analysis, which was conducted 6 weeks ago during a routine licensing review. His conclusion, and he marks this as preliminary, pending further investigation, is that the substructure is not generated by our equipment. It is, in his assessment, being coupled onto our carrier from an external source. He cannot identify the source. He has recommended that we continue broadcasting as the substructure is well below any threshold that would affect audio quality or licensing compliance, but he has also recommended that a copy of the spectrogram be forwarded to the Coordination Office for comparison with the anomalous deep space content. I authorized that transmission at 3:35. I want to be clear about what I am and am not saying here. Our broadcast signal contains data that we did not put there. The data is structured. We do not know where it came from. I am not claiming it is related to the probe. Our engineer believes the comparison is worth making, and I have acted on that belief. This is KQWL 1620 AM. I should also note, because I committed to maintaining a transparent record of station operations, that the power output figure at the time of the spectrum analysis was measured at 4.45 kilowatts. That is below our licensed floor of 4.5. The engineer has filed an automatic notification with the Regional Licensing Authority, as required when output drops below tolerance. He attributes the decline to possible impedance mismatch in the transmission line, which the emergency inspection, now underway, is intended to diagnose. In the meantime, we remain on the air. Our signal may be slightly weaker in fringe reception areas. If you are hearing this broadcast, you are within adequate range. Sunday evening, 6:10 p.m. The Coordination Office has responded to our spectrogram submission. Their response arrived in under 2 hours, which is significantly faster than any previous communication from them to this desk. The response is 3 sentences. I will paraphrase them closely. First, the Coordination Office confirms receipt of the spectrogram. Second, the Coordination Office states that the substructure identified in our carrier signal is structurally consistent with content elements observed in the primary anomalies data stream. Third, the Coordination Office advises that KQL continue broadcasting without modification and report any further changes in the substructure's amplitude or characteristics. No further explanation is provided. No guidance on what the substructure contains, if anything. No assessment of risk. 3 sentences. I have been at this desk for approximately 36 hours. I am telling you what I know. Our station's broadcast is carrying data we did not put there, and the Coordination Office has confirmed that this data resembles the probe's anomalous transmission. We have been advised to keep broadcasting. We are keeping broadcasting. The fidelity of the primary anomaly, the probe's own content, was 0.74 as of early afternoon. I do not have a more recent figure. The cooperative has still not updated its status page. The university linguistics team has not issued a new memo since this morning. The amateur operators are largely silent. What I have is what I have told you, and when more arrives, you will hear it from this desk. Sunday night, late, perhaps 11 p.m. I stepped away from the desk for 40 minutes to eat, and came back to 3 items in the queue. I will take them in order. First, the Coordination Office issued its evening update at approximately 9:15. The fidelity figure is 0.78. The memo is short, 2 paragraphs. The first states that the controlled reception comparison has been replicated at a third facility and that the result is consistent with the earlier finding. Content varies by receiver. The second paragraph introduces a new classification term. The anomalous content is now described as adaptive correspondence. The memo does not explain the term beyond what the 2 words individually suggest. It does note that the Accelerated Review Group's recommendation against decoding remains in effect, and that a formal interagency consultation has been scheduled for Monday afternoon. The memo states, and this is new language, that any party that has decoded or is actively decoding content from the primary anomaly is requested to contact the coordination office immediately and suspend further analysis pending consultation. I will read that once more. Any party that has decoded or is actively decoding is requested to suspend and make contact. The phrasing implies that the coordination office believes decoding may have already occurred. It does not say so directly. Second item, our duty engineer has completed the emergency inspection of KQWL's transmission line. His findings are mixed. He identified a minor corroded connector at the base of the tower, consistent with salt air exposure and not unusual for a coastal installation, which he replaced. However, he states that the connector degradation accounts for approximately 0.1 kilowatts of the observed power loss, not the full 0.35 we have experienced since Thursday. The remaining loss is unexplained. More significantly, the post-repair spectrogram, conducted at approximately 10 p.m. Sunday, shows that the substructure in our carrier signal has not diminished. It remains at the same amplitude and in the same frequency band as before the connector replacement. The engineer's updated assessment is that the substructure is not entering our signal through the transmission line. It is, in his words, present in the baseband signal prior to amplification. That means it is appearing in our signal before our equipment broadcasts it. I do not fully understand the implications of that, but the engineer has described it to me plainly. Whatever is putting data into our carrier is doing so inside our facility, at a point in the signal chain before the transmitter amplifies and sends it. He has inspected the studio equipment and found no physical anomaly. He has no explanation. He is remaining on site through the night. Third item, a caller from the county overlook, the viewpoint turnout on the Three Capes Road, reached the desk at approximately 10:30 p.m. Sunday. This person, who identified as a long-haul truck driver parked for the night, stated that he had been listening to our broadcast on his cab radio and had noticed a faint secondary audio layer beneath the program content. He described it as rhythmic, almost tonal, and present only when the radio was tuned precisely to our frequency. Shifting even slightly off frequency caused it to disappear. He asked whether we were running a test signal. We are not. I asked him to describe the sound more precisely. He said it reminded him of someone reading aloud very quietly in a room where you cannot quite make out the words. I logged the report. I do not know whether what he is hearing corresponds to the substructure our engineer identified, though the spectral characteristics would be consistent with a faint audio band artifact under certain receiver conditions. I have asked the engineer whether the substructure could be audible on a sensitive receiver. His answer was that at 40 decibels below carrier it should not be, but that if the substructure has increased in amplitude since the analysis, it might begin to resolve as audio on high-sensitivity equipment. He has scheduled a follow-up spectrogram for 6 a.m. Monday morning, early, 4:50 a.m. I slept in the break room for 3 hours. The overnight queue contains one item of significance. At 0200 Monday, the coordination office issued what it describes as a preliminary findings summary from the Accelerated Review Group. This is the longest document we have received, 4 pages. I have it in front of me and will summarize the key points. Finding 1. The anomalous content is confirmed to vary by receiver, and the variance is not random. Each receiving facility's version of the content contains elements that reference verifiable characteristics of that facility. The review group has tested this against 5 independent receivers, and the result is consistent in all cases. Finding 2. The content received by each facility has increased in what the document calls personal specificity over time. Early versions referenced institutional characteristics such as antenna size and location, while later versions reference operational details such as maintenance schedules, staffing patterns, and in one case, the name of a piece of equipment that was decommissioned 8 years ago, but remains in the facility's internal documentation. Finding 3, and I want to be careful here because the language is hedged, the review group states that the trajectory of increasing specificity, if sustained, will within approximately 12 to 18 hours produce content that references individual personnel rather than institutional characteristics. The document does not call this a prediction. It calls it a projection based on observed rate. The fidelity figure in this document is given as 0.82. Finding 4 is the one that has kept me from going back to sleep. The review group states that among the 5 facilities included in the comparison, one facility reported that its received content contained a passage describing an event that had not yet occurred at the time of reception, but that did occur, as described, approximately 90 minutes later. The event in question was minor and operational. A specific instrument at the facility went offline for calibration. The calibration was not scheduled at the time the content was received. The decision to calibrate was made by a technician 45 minutes after reception, for reasons unrelated to the anomaly. The review group notes this finding with what it calls maximum caution and states that it may represent coincidence, given the small sample and the routine nature of the event. The review group does not use the word predictive, it uses the phrase temporally displaced reference. The fidelity is 0.82, Monday morning, 7:20 a.m. The follow-up spectrogram of KQWL's carrier signal has been completed. The substructure has increased in amplitude. It is now approximately 32 decibels below carrier, up from 40 decibels yesterday afternoon. The engineer states that at this level it will be audible as a faint background presence on high-sensitivity receivers or in quiet passages of our broadcast audio. He estimates that at the current rate of increase, the substructure will become audible on standard consumer radios within 18 to 24 hours. He has asked me whether we should take the station off the air. I have consulted with our station director, who has consulted with the coordination office. The coordination office's response, received at 7:05 this morning, is that KQWL should remain on the air and that the substructure does not at this time constitute a hazard to listeners. The station director has accepted this guidance. We remain broadcasting. The power output reading this morning is 4.4 kilowatts. That is now below license tolerance for the second consecutive measurement. Our licensing notification remains on file. No response from the regional authority has been received. I want to issue the coordination office's latest public guidance, which arrived with this morning's update. Effective immediately, residents are advised to limit use of networked personal devices to essential communications only. Non-essential data synchronization, automatic updates, cloud backup, media streaming from automated queues should be disabled or paused until further notice. The guidance states that this measure is precautionary and is not indicative of a confirmed threat to personal data security. Limit network device use to essential communications. Disable non-essential synchronization. That is the current guidance. It is 7:30 a.m. Monday Pacific Time. The fidelity stands at 0.82. The interagency consultation is scheduled for this afternoon. The desk continues. Monday mid-morning, approximately 9:40 a.m. I have 2 developments to report. The first concerns the pharmacy dispensing network serving the Tillamook County area. The county health office contacted this desk at approximately 8:15 a.m. to advise that 3 pharmacies in the county, 2 in Tillamook proper and 1 in Rockaway Beach, have reported irregularities in their automated dispensing verification systems. These systems cross-reference each prescription against a national drug interaction database before authorizing a pharmacist to fill it. Beginning sometime overnight Sunday, the systems at all 3 locations began returning verification responses that include drug interaction warnings for medications not present in the prescription being checked. The warnings reference compounds that the pharmacists describe as not corresponding to any approved pharmaceutical in their formulary database. The compounds have names that are formatted like legitimate drug names, correct syllable structure, plausible prefixes and suffixes, but do not exist. The health office reports that the pharmacies have reverted to manual verification using printed reference materials, a process that takes approximately 4 times longer per prescription. The Monday morning queue at the Tillamook location was, as of 8 a.m., approximately 90 minutes behind normal processing time, with 37 prescriptions awaiting manual verification. The health office states that no patient safety incident has occurred and that the manual process is adequate to prevent dispensing errors. The second development is this: the university linguistics team has broken its silence. They issued a memo at approximately 9 a.m. Monday, their first communication since Saturday morning. The memo is co-signed by the Computational Semiotics Group and by a third party identified only as a consulting signals analysis body operating under national security protocols. The memo's central finding is stated in one sentence, which I will paraphrase as closely as I can. The anomalous content, at its current fidelity level, contains passages that are fully parsable as natural language when mapped against a specific phonological key that the consulting body has derived through classified methods. In plain terms, someone has decoded part of it. The memo does not say what the decoded passages contain. It does not say in what language they resolve. It states only that decoding has been achieved for a limited subset of the content stream, and that the results have been submitted to the Coordination Office for review ahead of the interagency consultation this afternoon. The memo notes that the decoded passages represent content received at a single facility and may not be representative of content received elsewhere, given the confirmed receiver-specific variance. The fidelity figure is given as 0.84. I do not know whether the Coordination Office's recommendation against decoding has been violated or whether the consulting body operates under a separate authority. The memo does not address this. Monday, late morning, 11:05. A caller from Wheeler, a woman who operates a small bookkeeping service for local fishing charters, reached the desk at approximately 10 a.m. to report an irregularity in her payroll processing software. The system, which she runs weekly to generate direct deposit instructions for her clients' employees, produced its Monday batch file as expected. But when she reviewed the file before submission, it contained payment instructions for 3 individuals who are not employed by any of her clients. The instructions were formatted correctly: valid routing numbers, valid account numbers, correct tax withholding calculations, appropriate pay periods, but the recipient names were unknown to her. She described the names as ordinary, unremarkable names that she simply did not recognize. She contacted her software vendor, who confirmed that the system should not be capable of adding recipients without manual input. The vendor's diagnostic log showed no record of manual entry for the 3 phantom employees. The caller did not submit the batch file. She has disconnected the system from her network and is processing this week's payroll by hand, a process she estimates will take an additional 6 hours. I asked her whether the phantom entries contained any other identifying information: addresses, employee numbers, start dates. She said yes. Each entry included a start date. All 3 start dates were in the future. 2 were next Monday. 1 was 3 weeks from now. I want to pause and note something about the pattern of these reports. I have now logged institutional data irregularities involving a medical clinic's patient records, a school district's attendance system, a harbor's birth assignments, a grocery cooperative's ordering system, a waste collection routing system, a pharmacy dispensing network, and a bookkeeping payroll system. In each case, the system generates entries that are correctly formatted but reference entities that do not exist. In several cases, the phantom entries contain temporal references to future dates. I am stating what the reports have in common. The Coordination Office has acknowledged these reports collectively, but has not issued any finding regarding their cause or their relationship to the primary anomaly. The institutional systems affected are, in most cases, not connected to one another and use different software platforms from different vendors. Several are partially or fully air-gapped. That is what I can tell you. It is now approximately 11:30 a.m. Monday. The interagency consultation is scheduled to begin within the next few hours, though the Coordination Office has not specified an exact time. The decoded passages have been submitted for review. The fidelity stands at 0.84. Our carrier signal continues to show substructure at 32 decibels below carrier, unchanged since this morning's measurement, which is itself notable, as the amplitude had been increasing steadily before that. The engineer describes the plateau as possibly meaningful, possibly instrumental. He will remeasure at noon. I have one more item to relay before the desk pauses for the consultation period. The Coordination Office's 9 a.m. Monday memo contained, in its final paragraph, a new piece of public guidance. I will read it in full paraphrase. Residents are advised that any device receiving broadcast transmissions, radio, television, or networked audio, should not be left operating unattended in enclosed spaces for periods exceeding 4 hours. Devices should be powered off when not actively in use. This guidance applies to all broadcast receiving equipment regardless of frequency band or source. The memo describes this as a standard precautionary measure during periods of anomalous electromagnetic activity and states that it does not indicate a confirmed hazard to persons or property. I will read the operative instruction once more. Do not leave broadcast receiving devices operating unattended for more than 4 hours. Power off when not in use. That is the current guidance. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. The desk continues after the consultation. Monday afternoon, 3:50 p.m., The interagency consultation concluded approximately 40 minutes ago. The Coordination Office has issued what it describes as a post-consultation summary for authorized editorial relay. I have it in front of me. It is 2 pages. I will give you what it contains. The summary confirms that partial decoding of the anomalous content has been achieved. It confirms that the decoded passages resolve into natural language. It confirms, and this is the first time this has been stated in an official document provided to this desk, that the language is English, not a constructed analog, not a statistical approximation, English with syntax and vocabulary consistent with contemporary use. The summary states that the decoded passages, which represent content received at a single facility, describe operational characteristics of that facility with a degree of accuracy the review group calls consistent with direct observational access. The passages describe the facility's layout, its equipment configuration, its staffing schedule on the day of reception, and, this is in the document, the content of a printed notice posted on the wall of the facility's control room. A notice that was posted that morning. The fidelity figure in the post-consultation summary is 0.87. The summary further states that the interagency consultation reached consensus on one procedural point, that no additional facilities should attempt decoding until the receiver-specific variance is better understood. The concern, as I understand it from the summary, is that decoding appears to produce content specific to the decoder. Each party that decodes receives something addressed to them. The consultation group describes this as an informational topology without precedent in communication science, and recommends that further decoding be conducted only under controlled conditions with full documentation. The summary does not explain what addressed to them means beyond what the facility comparison already showed, but the language has shifted. Saturday's memos described recipient-specific indexing. Sundays described adaptive correspondence. This document uses the phrase directed personal address. Monday, late afternoon, 5:15 p.m. I need to correct something I reported earlier. On Saturday morning, I relayed the Coordination Office's statement that no personal names, identification numbers, or biographical details have been identified in the content. The editorial liaison has contacted this desk directly, by telephone, not through the memo channel, to advise that this statement is no longer accurate. The liaison did not provide details. The liaison stated only that the post-consultation review identified content elements consistent with personal biographical reference in the decoded passages, and that an updated public statement would be issued within 24 hours. I asked whether any individual had been notified that they were referenced in the content. The liaison said that question was outside the scope of what could be discussed on this channel. The fidelity figure, per the liaison's verbal communication, is 0.89. I want to address something that has been circulating since the consultation ended. Several sources, none of them official, none of them verified through this desk, are claiming that the decoded content contains specific predictive statements about events that have since occurred. I cannot confirm this. The official documents I have reference a single instance of what the review group called temporally displaced reference, involving a minor calibration event. I have no evidence of anything beyond that. But I will note that the Coordination Office has not denied these claims either. They have not called them false. I am noting the absence of denial, which is not the same as confirmation. Monday evening, 7:40 p.m. The Coordination Office has issued what it calls a stabilization notice. The fidelity figure is 0.91. The notice states that the rate of fidelity increase has begun to decelerate, not reverse, but slow. The review group projects that fidelity will plateau at or near 0.95 within the next 12 to 24 hours. The notice describes this as consistent with a transmission approaching its intended final resolution. I want to be careful with that phrase. Intended final resolution implies purpose. It implies that the content is moving toward a target state, and that the target state is a feature of its design, not an artifact of its evolution. The Coordination Office has used that phrase in an official document. The stabilization notice also contains a finding regarding the parallel data events, the phantom entries in institutional systems. The notice states that as of Monday afternoon, the phantom entries have stopped appearing in newly affected systems. Systems that were already affected continue to display them, but no new systems have reported fresh irregularities since approximately noon Monday. The notice describes this as consistent with a mapping process that has reached completion. Again, language implying purpose, completion, design. Our own station's carrier signal substructure was remeasured at 6 p.m. Monday. The amplitude has not increased since this morning's measurement and remains at 32 decibels below carrier. The engineer describes it as stable. He has not been able to determine its content or decode it with the equipment available to him. He notes that doing so would require spectrographic analysis tools more sophisticated than what a broadcast facility typically maintains. He has not requested outside assistance pending guidance from the coordination office. The power output reading at 6 p.m. was 4.4 kilowatts, unchanged from this morning. The decline appears to have halted alongside the substructure's amplitude stabilization. The engineer calls this suggestive but not conclusive. The Regional Licensing Authority has acknowledged our below tolerance notification and has granted a 14-day provisional operating waiver while we investigate. We remain on the air. Monday, 9:30 p.m. The coordination office has issued what it describes as its final scheduled update for the day. The fidelity is 0.92. The update is brief. It states that the interagency consultation group will reconvene Tuesday morning and that a public-facing summary of findings will be issued by Tuesday afternoon. It states that the probe itself continues to function nominally and that no commands have been sent to alter its operational state. It states that the anomalous transmission continues and that its content for any given receiver now resolves at a level the review group describes as conversational fluency. That is the phrase. Conversational fluency. The probe is, by this assessment, speaking. To whom and about what depends on who is listening. The update contains one final piece of public guidance. I will read it plainly. Effective immediately, residents are advised not to attempt to receive, decode, interpret, or respond to any anomalous content that may be present in broadcast or data transmissions. Any content encountered that appears to address the recipient personally, by name, by reference to private information, or by description of future events, should be disregarded and reported to the coordination office through established channels. Do not engage with it. Do not respond. Do not reply. That is the current guidance. The coordination office states that this measure is precautionary and does not indicate a confirmed hazard, but notes that the informational characteristics of the anomaly are not fully understood and interaction protocols have not been established. I have one more item to report before this desk concludes its current broadcast cycle. It arrived at 9:15 p.m. from our duty engineer, who has been monitoring our carrier signal continuously since this afternoon. His 9 p.m. notation reads as follows. Substructure amplitude unchanged at -32 dB. However, spectral characteristics have shifted. Substructure now exhibits frequency modulation patterns consistent with voiceband audio encoding. Content remains below intelligibility threshold on standard equipment, but is structurally consistent with spoken word formatting. End quote. I read that as it was written. The data embedded in our broadcast signal is structured like speech. It is not yet loud enough to hear on your radio. It is there. The probe's transmission continues. Its fidelity is 0.92 and stabilizing. Its content is in English. It varies by listener. It references private information. It describes events before they occur. It is, by every functional measure available to the institution studying it, talking. To whom it is talking remains unresolved. Whether the content in our own carrier signal is the same transmission, a fragment of it, or something else entirely, is a question the coordination office has not addressed. Whether the phantom data entries that appeared in institutional systems across this county, and, apparently, across the country, are transcriptions, translations, or something the desk has no category for, is another question without an answer tonight. One thing I can tell you that was not true 6 days ago, the probe responded. That much is now confirmed at every institutional level with authority over the question. It responded to something, not to us. No command was sent. But it responded. To what no one has said. What the content says, specifically, has not been made public and may not be made public pending Tuesday's consultation. The coordination office uses the word intended. The university uses the word correspondence. The cooperative, before it went silent, used the word addressed. I have one final note. This arrived at the desk 9 minutes ago as I was preparing this summary. It is from the editorial liaison, text only, no memo header, no classification. It reads, KQWL carrier substructure content, if decoded, will likely exhibit receiver-specific characteristics consistent with directed personal address. Coordination Office recommends station personnel do not attempt decoding. Acknowledge receipt. I have acknowledged receipt. The morning fog has not come in along Tillamook County tonight. The harbor at Garibaldi has not sounded its 2 a.m. horn. No automated system in the county has generated a new phantom entry since noon. The Signals Cooperative has not updated its status page in 49 hours. The amateur radio operators who were monitoring have not come back on the air. The gold anodized disc replicas hanging in children's bedrooms have not been taken down. Residents within the broadcast area are advised to power off all receiving devices when not actively in use, to refrain from any attempt to decode or respond to anomalous content in any medium, and to maintain manual-only operation of data systems until further notice from the Coordination Office. Do not engage with content that addresses you. Do not reply. Remain within the perimeter. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network.